March the 31st, 1985, WrestleMania 1, perhaps the most important night in Western professional wrestling history. The night where Vince McMahon, according to Tito Santana during a 2015 interview, looked at his roster and staff that fateful night and said, we're either going to make it or we're going to go broke, as he tried to take his sports entertainment juggernaut to the tippy top of pop culture. Luckily, the 19,121 inside Madison Square Garden and the over 1 million people watching the event on closed circuit television made the event a success. And now we're just about to watch WrestleMania 39. Here's some behind the scenes stuff you maybe didn't know about the grandest stage of them all. WrestleMania 1, Mr. T walked out on the show. Everyone knows how Roddy Piper wasn't too keen on working a professional wrestling match with someone who wasn't a bona fide professional wrestler. Because of that, Piper and star of the world back then, Mr. T, they famously didn't get along. This led to some form of paranoia going on inside the head of Mr. Lawrence Trudeau. I don't know if that's how you pronounce Mr. T's proper second name. Fearing that Hot Rod and tag team partner for the night, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, would take liberties and shoot on this outsider, making an example of him, mixing it up in a still very protected business all the way back then. This naturally led to Mr. T wanting out of WrestleMania 1 on show day itself. Fortunately for everyone concerned, Mr. T worked well with Orndorff and especially Piper when the ring bell was rung, so well that of course we got a lovely boxing match a year later. WrestleMania 2, Bobby Heenan actually nearly got fired. Nah, seriously, right? So the story goes that Bobby Heenan had been dealing with neck issues due to a knock sustained earlier in the 1980s, but continued to do physical roles in the professional wrestling ring, which only made things worse. So, in the days before WrestleMania 2, Heenan had an MRI done on his neck where it was discovered that he had 2 fractured vertebrae and he was badly needing surgery. The night before WrestleMania, Heenan was in the hospital and was contacted by WWE, who told him if he missed his scheduled appearance at WrestleMania 2, he would have been fired. So, because he's a better boy than both you or I, Bobby got out of his hospital bed, he flew to LA, he did his physical role in the Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy blue barred steel cage match, he caught a flight back to the same hospital in Tampa, Florida the next morning and had his surgery done then. WrestleMania 3, Andre the Giant drank 14 bottles of wine before his match with Hulk Hogan. Right then, so the story goes that Paul Orndorff was waiting in the wings to replace Andre the Giant in the main event because Andre was really struggling with his back in the build-up to the show. At 40 years old, the stresses of the business on the body, especially one as wild as Andre's, were taking their toll. So much so that the 8th wonder of the world had emergency surgery in the days before the Hogan match and had a back brace in his singlet on the night. On top of that, presumably to help cope with the pain of taking that slam, that famous slam that Hogan did to Andre, Andre is said to have drank 14 bottles of wine before the show, and I'm not doubting that claim whatsoever. During an episode of WWE's Legends of Wrestling, Mike Graham confirmed he witnessed Andre the Giant consume 156 beers. That's 16-ounce cans, 156 of those in one night. WrestleMania 4, Jake the Snake scared Ivana Trump with Damien. WrestleMania 4 was held at Trump Plaza, but only if Jim Whelan Broadwalk Hall's name was actually Trump Plaza. Because of that, Donald Trump was at WrestleMania 4 and he brought along his first wife Ivana to the show. Ivana was seen at ringside during Jake the Snake's match with Rick Rude, and in a moment that wasn't caught on camera, Jake allegedly dragged his massive snake across Ivana's chest. In a moment that is said to have legitimately scared her and saw her fall back in her chair. Understandably, as I just said, Jake's snake was absolutely massive. Allegedly, Ivana wanted to see Damien the Snake shot with an actual gun. Jake the Snake claimed it was just a bit of a mishap, while Bobby Heenan, Rick Rude's manager on the night who was at ringside at the time, claimed in his book that it was Jake getting back at Ivana, who clearly wasn't watching the show. WrestleMania 5, Shawn Michaels had a massive stinking hangover. So, the night before WrestleMania 5, Shawn Michaels is said to have had a disagreement with his then wife, Teresa. Not Mother Teresa, just Teresa. After this disagreement, a sad and I'm sure somber 23-year-old Heartbreak Kid with that stinking mullet, he jetted off to a local bar where he and straight edge superstar, but without the straight edges, Marty Jannetty drank and partied the night away until 4 a.m. After roughly 4 hours of sleep, lots of coffee, and lots of what were described as energy pills, Michaels rocked up to WrestleMania 5 looking like a bag of poo, and then wrestled like Shawn Michaels can because he isn't even a human. WrestleMania 6, Roddy Piper's paint would not come off his body. I'm here to champion all people regardless of colour, is what Roddy Piper claimed his look at WrestleMania 6 was all about in his 2016 biography called Rowdy. I don't know if I believe the late great Hot Rod there, even if he was the babyface for this match. Anyway, the joke's on the Hot Rod for this horrible paint job, as he couldn't get the stuff off and was forced to fly home looking like that because Andre the Giant and Arnold Scarland threw the solution used to clean it off away, filling that solution's bottle with water instead, because all the way back then, wrestlers like to make other wrestlers' lives a living hell. Could you imagine looking like that? I mean, no, you couldn't, could you? Let's move on. WrestleMania 7. This was supposed to be Macho Man's retirement match. We all know about the prospect of chic tugboat at WrestleMania 7, so let's look back at more backstage goings-on surrounding professional wrestling greats at that event. Macho Man was said to be longing for a quieter life at home, to spend time with Elizabeth and all that nice stuff all the way back in 1991. By the way, the McMahon saying Macho Man is too old is said to have been a thing in 1994, just before you head down to the comments there. So, his match with the Ultimate Warrior was to be his retirement bout. Macho was all set to continue as a commentator for the WWE, but this was it for him as an in-ring performer. However, by the summer of 1991, with Warrior gone from the company after a dispute with McMahon and Hogan going through some stuff, Vince was on the phone to Macho, begging the Madness to beef up his babyface ranks. After taking a few live event bookings under a mask as Mr. Madness, yes, that was a real thing, Macho relented and continued his in-ring career. WrestleMania 8, Bret Hart and Shane McMahon scuffle the night before the show. Let me read this slice of Hitman, my real life in the cartoon world of wrestling, where we find Bret Hart and his then wife Julie in a bar the night before WrestleMania 8. This is what Bret had to say. Vince's son Shane walked in and he approached. A startled Julie jolted towards me. When he greeted me with a handshake, I smiled and said, "Let me introduce you to my wife." Shane turned beet red. We all know what that looks like, don't we? There was an awkward silence. Julie seemed furious and I had no idea why. Carlo, who Bret claims is a red-headed Italian fan turned friend who travelled down from Toronto to be with the Hearts, he whispered to Bret, he just goosed Julie, big time. Obviously Shane hadn't a clue who she was. Shane quickly took a stool at the other end of the bar. I was inclined to forget it, but when I looked out over at him, I noticed he was studying me with a puzzled defiance. I thought, okay, he knows I know what he did and thinks that since his daddy owns me, I won't do anything. He was wrong, because it was the night before a big match, I wasn't drinking, and Julie's foul mood, it had me even more testy. I slammed my boss's kid against the wall, telling him through clenched teeth that if he ever touched my wife again, I would rip his head off. I never would have hurt him, but I had to let him know I wasn't afraid of who he was. Then Carlo pried me away, Shane still protesting his innocence. Naughty Shane. WrestleMania 9, Doink the Clown's exploding brain. So twin magic, but with clowns is what we got at WrestleMania 9, but it was supposed to be even weirder, didn't you know? This was according to Dave Meltzer, with one of the other pictures made to Doink for the match was to see his headwear with the wig and all that stuff on there, fitted with some sort of device that would have squirted clown juice up in the face of Crush when Crush did the cranium crunching to Doink's skull in the closing stages of their match. This viscous substance would have rendered Crush blind, allowing Doink to pick up the pinfall win. When you think about it, what we got was actually quite good, really. WrestleMania 10, Randy Savage booked the ending to the show. A year is a long time in professional wrestling. 1 year you're Bret Hart at the end of WrestleMania 9, and then a year later you're Bret Hart at the end of WrestleMania 10. Hoisted up on the shoulders of your babyface friends and symbolically showed off as the new linchpin of a new generation of professional wrestling. Bret Hart later said it was Macho Man's idea to do the ending to WrestleMania 10, with the likes of Vince McMahon and Gorilla Monsoon joining in to do something they wouldn't normally do to make the moment all the more monumental. After winning the viewers poll at the end of the 1994 Royal Rumble, we all know this one, don't we? Vince legitimately made up his mind for WrestleMania 10 by listening to the pops for the joint winners of the 1994 Royal Rumble. This was the moment where Vince said, "This is the non-steroid guy taking the place of the steroid guy for my new generation of professional wrestling." WrestleMania 11, the KLIQ gained their 5th member that night. A 25-year-old was finishing up his no-compete period after leaving WCW in early 1995. He waltzes into WrestleMania 11. He sees Terry Taylor, who allegedly says to him, "These are the lads to know, get to know them," while pointing at Kevin Nash and Shawn Michaels sitting backstage after the show was over. That 25-year-old was Paul Levesque, and he was the favourite wrestler of the KLIQ as the story goes. The KLIQ boys would be on the road in a hotel room and would tune in to watch WCW just to see his matches. He was the KLIQ's guy before he was the KLIQ's guy. OMG, it's terrorizing, Shawn Michaels probably said, and after that meeting at WrestleMania 11, the rest is history. WrestleMania 12, Marc Mero makes WWF history. Two things took place 3 weeks before WrestleMania 12. One was the shooting of most of the Hollywood backlot brawl between Roddy Piper and Goldust, and the other was Johnny B. Bad leaving WCW for WWE after a meeting with Eric Bischoff. The story goes that Vince McMahon was so annoyed at losing most of his top stars to WCW that he wanted to take back one of theirs. And the man who would become Wildman Marc Mero was the one chosen. He was the chosen one. In the process of jumping ship, Mero is said to have made history as he was handed the first ever guaranteed contract in WWE history. Vince really picked a winner with that one. WrestleMania 13, Stone Cold Steve Austin almost bottled the Blade job. When you think of WrestleMania 13, you think of Stone Cold Steve Austin looking like Gromit the dog after Wallace's jam machine went off a little bit too late. This was the moment that made the biggest babyface run in the history of the bloody business. Well, it turns out that Stone Cold almost got Chili McFree's feet when it came to Bret Hart sticking the little razor blade inside of Steve's big bald head. Yeah, Bret did it for Steve because Bret is a very good friend. Blading was still forbidden in the WWE, and fearing a massive fine for getting human juice all over the ring and the ringside area, Steve allegedly said to Bret Hart, "Maybe we shouldn't," just before the shot into the guardrail that caused the blood to be spilled. Steve shouldn't have worried if Vince McMahon didn't issue a fine, and of course used it just about wherever he could in the years that followed WrestleMania. WrestleMania 14, Vince McMahon loved the DX Band's performance. You ask anyone about the DX Band's performance at WrestleMania 14 and they will tell you about two things. First and foremost, a brilliant rendition of the DX theme for Shawn Michaels' entrance in the main event that perfectly encapsulated the attitude of the times and the fact they butchered America the Beautiful, or just did it in their own special way, whatever floats your boat. Only in the USA and the WWF can there be this type of freedom of expression, Jim Ross said immediately after the rendition. He knew how bad it was. You'll be surprised to hear that Mr. America himself, Vince McMahon, loved the rendition. That's like learning your own mother loves Bay Blades. The late Chris Warren noted in an interview in 2007 that Vince loved it because it ensured that both Triple H and Shawn Michaels' entrances would have been booed out the building. I'm sure that's what was going through the mind of the DX Band the entire time. WrestleMania 15, Stone Cold Steve Austin forgot his entrance vest. Here's what the Texas Rattlesnake told ESPN in an interview in the year 2020. "I was mad at WrestleMania 15 because hell, I was going through a hell of a divorce and I forgot my damn ring vest. And I had to walk to the ring in a t-shirt. And you never want to walk to the ring in a t-shirt when it's WrestleMania. And you want to look $1,000,000 in full gimmick. You're not trying to sell a t-shirt, you're trying to put on a show. So that sucked on that standpoint. And honestly, Steve, we noticed, but we didn't really give a toss." WrestleMania 2000, Mick Foley wasn't seeing eye to eye with The Rock. Now you've got to think this one had something to do with those millions and millions of unprotected chair shots that happened at the previous year's Royal Rumble event, but Mick Foley reportedly wasn't seeing eye to eye with The Rock ahead of that McMahon in Every Corner main event of WrestleMania 2000. In a later printing of Foley's Have a Nice Day book, where the stuff about his Mania match was released as a later chapter, the Mixter claims he told his wife in the days before the event, "Don't be surprised if the match sucks and I don't sell a lot," while making reference to one of his 3 opponents that he wasn't getting along with. Many assume that was to be The Rock, with Foley later noting in Foley is Good, another one of his books, that he wouldn't make up with The Rock until sometime in 2001, so this entire timeline, it makes complete sense. WrestleMania X7, only money stopped Triple H facing Mike Tyson. 6 rounds, not sure if it was supposed to be proper boxing rules or if Triple H was going to be wearing gloves. Earl Hebner and legendary boxing official Mills Lane officiating the bout. Yes, instead of Triple H versus Undertaker in that barn burner that we got at WrestleMania 17, we almost got a wrestler versus boxer showcase thing that only didn't happen due to one reason, and it wasn't even the game not wanting to do that JOB in 2001. Here's what the game himself told WWE.com, but it ended up being a deal where the whole thing would have been a ludicrous amount of money and it got pushed off. That's what he said, and could you imagine what that thing would have looked like? WrestleMania 18, Triple H initially made 5 times more money than Chris Jericho. As if being made a glorified dog walker while holding the world title wasn't enough, Chris Jericho found out that his payday for WrestleMania 18 was merely in the 5 figures. This was way short of the 6-figure sum he was expecting for defending the world title on the grandest stage of them all, so the legend has it that Y2J walked up to Triple H and asked the game what kind of money he took home for that same match. Upon hearing that it was roughly 5 times what Jericho made, the Mania main event loser, remember, he went straight to Vince McMahon and he asked, "What the hell, man?" And then Vince McMahon reacted in a way that you didn't think was possible, because what he did was he asked JR, the head of talent relations at the time, to write Chris Jericho a new check. And as we say up here in Newcastle upon Tyne in sunny old England, shy bairns get out. WrestleMania 19, the shooting star press was suggested to Brock that day. How Brock Lesnar didn't break his neck doing that shooting star press to Kurt Angle still boggles the mind to this day. It's a move that the Beast Incarnate nailed on more than one occasion before his initial run on the main roster in 2002, of course. John Laurinaitis, who was the agent for the match, reportedly asked Brock Lesnar about doing the SSP for the finish for the match while having lunch on the day of WrestleMania 19. Brock said, "Yeah, but I need to practice." So in the Mania ring, that's what he did, using crash pads to find his range and all that good stuff. We all know what happened when an exhausted Lesnar scaled those turnbuckles at the end of the match, and I'm just glad he survived the ordeal. WrestleMania 20, Shane McMahon took part in the chance against Brock Lesnar and Goldberg. Everyone and their dog knew that both Brock Lesnar and Goldberg were leaving WWE after WrestleMania 20. So, with their match involving a lot of posturing and "I'm harder than you, let's have a scrap" kind of chitter-chatter, the crowd were given plenty of opportunity to voice their displeasure. Part of the crowd that night for the match was Shane McMahon, who was known to come from behind the curtain and find a little spot in the certain matches without drawing too much attention to himself. Fans in the arena, however, did see Shane McMahon, and he was said to have been singing along with the "You Sold Out" chants that were aimed at Bill and Brock, even though Brock was doing the exact opposite by walking away from a bumper deal he had signed the previous year. WrestleMania 21, the Brothers of Destruction were supposed to have different matches. Imagine if we didn't get The Undertaker versus Randy Orton at WrestleMania 21. The first match where you thought the streak was actually going to be a goner. Imagine if Kane didn't compete in the Money in the Bank ladder match. However, would we have coped? There's no easy way to say this, but The Undertaker and Kane were initially supposed to face Snitsky and Heidenreich in a tag team match at WrestleMania 21. Vince McMahon likes big sweaty men. Undertaker instead feuded with Heidenreich up until the Royal Rumble of 2005, while Kane and Snitsky's program also finished around the same time. Phew! WrestleMania 22, the main event was quite literally cut in half. They say several matches ran long at WrestleMania 22, but with Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels clocking in at a full 4 minutes longer than any other match up to the triple threat bout for the World Heavyweight Championship, I think we know where we can blame folk. Yes, those two folk. It said the match was initially going to be 19 minutes, but just before Ray, Kurt and Randy headed for the ring, they were told the unfortunate news that the match was being cut to 9 minutes. A triple threat match for the world title getting 9 minutes if only this match wasn't being followed by the really essential Playboy pillow fight, and Cena versus Triple H didn't need every single second of the 22 minutes they got. Surely they could have spread the time more evenly. WrestleMania 23, the women's title match was nearly scrapped. Just before Melina was set to defend her women's title in a lumberjill match against Ashley, we saw Vince McMahon have his head shaved completely bald after Bobby Lashley saw off Umaga. Because the hair shaving portion of the festivities went on for longer than it was intended to, both Ashley and Melina were told their match was getting cut for time and was even called off completely at one stage. Melina told AfterBuzz TV's Raw After Show a few years back that on her way through the curtain, a certain producer looked at her in the eye and said, "We can squeeze you in," as if Melina was angling for a last-minute haircut, not a WrestleMania women's title match. WrestleMania 24. Floyd Mayweather was trained by Matt Sydal. Yes, because he was roughly the same size as Money Mayweather, Matt Sydal was the man chosen to help the boxer execute some simpler professional wrestling spots. Matt would do a spot while Floyd watched, and then Floyd would do the same spot, and so on and so on. And you know what? It worked. It's often reported that WWE initially wanted Oscar De La Hoya for Mania 24, and he would have teamed with Rey Mysterio to take on the team of Floyd Money Mayweather. And brace yourselves, everybody. Shane McMahon, who, by the way, taught Floyd everything he knows inside the boxing ring. Of course he did. He's the best in the world. WrestleMania 25, the Ballad of Jericho and Rourke. After Mickey Rourke brought Roddy Piper to tears with his brilliant performance as Randy the Ram Robinson in The Wrestler, he appeared on the red carpet at the Screen Actors Guild the same night as the 2009 Royal Rumble was taking place and issued a challenge for Chris Jericho. Jericho, though, he had no idea what the hell was going on, because it turned out while Vince McMahon and Rourke had reached terms on a deal, Mickey wasn't supposed to say anything until after the Academy Awards in February. You see, Jericho and Rourke, they were supposed to have a match, but after the success of The Wrestler, Rourke's agent thought it was a bad idea for him to actually do the wrestling, especially on a stage like WrestleMania 25. But wait, there do be more! After a split-screen appearance on Larry King Live, where Jericho was being an ass clown towards Rourke in kayfabe ahead of WrestleMania 25, when it came to rehearsing the stuff Mickey and Chris were going to do together at WrestleMania 25, Mickey thought Chris might shoot on him, so he brought Josh Barnett and Frank Shamrock with him as backup. Talk about working a work into a Shoot My Brothers. WrestleMania 26, CM Punk was supposed to turn Rey's kids against him. Oh, how the turntables. WrestleMania 39 will see Dominic Mysterio and his deadbeat dad Rey take on each other in singles action. If plans for WrestleMania 26 would have come to fruition, the arc for this story could have started all the way back in 2010 and not 2012, as we saw by Rey beating up his kids while playing a video game. The tweet's there, it's a real thing. Straight Edge Society leader Punk was to have gone all 1996 Raven in ECW on Rey Mysterio by turning Dom and Aaliyah against their dad. The company apparently stopped the idea from happening because it was a bit too much for a PG product. The cowards. WrestleMania 27, Dean Malenko got massive heat for the Michael Cole and Jerry Lawler match. Imagine being a backstage agent and being told 61-year-old Jerry Lawler and definitely not a professional wrestler Michael Cole were getting 14 minutes and finishing in a DQ on a WrestleMania card. And it's your job to fill it with compelling action. Slap my ass and call me Betty. That is rough. Dean Malenko was given this task at WrestleMania 27, and it was probably his call to have the heel Michael Cole work Lawler's leg for what felt like 1,700 hours. Apparently, after the match, Malenko was the subject of a lot of heat for what was produced, but I would argue he was given an impossible task to carry out. Poor Dean, and poor us, quite frankly, for having to watch that match. WrestleMania 28, this is the closest we got to the Big Show and Shaq actually having a proper match. Yes, they did their bit at WrestleMania 32 in the Battle Royal. Yes, their storyline arc started when Shaq appeared on Raw in 2009. And yes, this match has apparently been cancelled more times than Jeremy Clarkson. But WrestleMania 28 looked to be the night the Big Show and Shaq would finally get it on. Firstly, Shaq himself claimed the match was on publicly, telling HollywoodLife.com that it was on now that he was retired from the basketball court. However, on February the 21st, 2012, WWE put out a statement statement titled, "Shaq will not compete at WrestleMania," and the match was off 6 weeks before the show, and the man himself was saying he was going to be there, while WWE were quietly planning the Big Show versus Cody Rhodes instead. WrestleMania 29 Triple H and Brock Lesnar's match was cursed. Triple H was left with his skin burned from his entrance smoke not quite being smoke. Brock Lesnar reportedly suffered a concussion and was noticeably not with it for several minutes. After a Triple H knee to the head, it went a bit wrong. Triple H was feared to have broken his arm after taking a bump into the ring steps that went slightly wrong. And then Shawn Michaels, who was only in the game's corner for the match, he was feared to have broken his nose when Lesnar caught him with one of his massive paws right to the face. Considering the tagline for Triple H versus Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam 2012 was the perfect storm, this one should have been labelled the injured fart. WrestleMania 30, Brie Bella wasn't allowed to celebrate with Bryan at the end of the show. No idea why this one happened, but it did, and it's a bit of a shame really. Brie and Bryan would be presented as a real-life couple on screen after WrestleMania 30, but for the event itself, with the confetti pouring down, Bryan's sister Billie Sue and her daughter in the ring, Conor the Crusher cheering on at ringside, it was just about perfect. The story goes that when she tried to leave gorilla position to meet her fiancé in the middle of the ring, Brie Bella was told no by WWE officials. If you know why, please send me a postcard, I want to know. WrestleMania 31, The Rock was the one to convince Ronda Rousey to get involved in the show. That segment involving The Rock, Triple H, Ronda Rousey and Stephanie McMahon lasted 24 minutes. I knew it was long, but I didn't realize it was that long. 24 minutes for a way to Triple H and a ho-ho, I've caught you shoplifting son to Stephanie McMahon. It turns out it was The Rock himself who was the one to piece the segment together, convincing Dana White that it was good business for him to allow Ronda on the show. White had famously stopped Brock Lesnar from being a part of WrestleMania 27 a few years earlier, but this wasn't happening for a second time. Rocky hosted SNL the night before WrestleMania 31, from which he and Ronda chartered a flight together to the Bay Area the next morning. From there, they were taken to the arena, and by mid-morning, it is said the segment was set. WrestleMania 32, Steve Austin injured his shoulder punching Rusev in the face. Stone Cold Steve Austin joined Texas man Shawn Michaels, and cactuses can be found in Texas, so here's Cactus Jack, aka Mick Foley, so it counts okay to beat down the League of Nations, because at WrestleMania 32, us little wrestle piggies were cheap popping all the way home. In the process of smacking Rusev upside the head, Steve aggravated an injury he sustained while training for his appearance at AT&T Stadium. While lifting weights and doing other gym things, Steve tore a rotator cuff and messed up his bicep and AC joint for good measure. Jim Ross confirmed on his podcast that the first punch Steve threw at Rusev's jaw resulted in a complete tear, turning a minor procedure into 3 hours of surgery. WrestleMania 33, call it the Citrus Bowl, damn it. Vince McMahon hated the name of the site of WrestleMania 33, so much so that he ordered his announcers to call the place by its former name, the Citrus Bowl. It's fresh, it's zesty, it's a seamless bowl that will get the people going. Its name in 2017 was, and still is to this day, the Camping World Stadium. WrestleMania 33, the Showcase of the Immortals, the granddaddy of them all, tents. This is pretty bad, but when you realise that year's prestigious WWE Hall of Fame ceremony also took place in the Smoothie King Arena as well, you can see why Vince McMahon called for the change. WrestleMania 34, Strowman could have picked somebody a lot better than Nicholas. Braun Strowman did well at WrestleMania 34, picking referee John Cone's son Nicholas out of the crowd so they could go on to win the Raw Tag Team titles. However, there were more qualified people in the crowd to help Braun get that victory. New Japan Pro Wrestling's Minoru Suzuki, Kazuchika Okada, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Juice Robinson, and Tomohiro Ishii were also part of the 78,133 fans at WrestleMania 34. The story goes that the main reason the New Japan Pro Wrestling lads were in town were to see Shinsuke Nakamura's WrestleMania debut, and Tanahashi in particular was tickled pink by Nakamura's heel turn. WrestleMania 35, Seth Rollins almost passes out on his way to the ring. Seth Rollins faced Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship in the opening match of WrestleMania 35. But the match even taking place could have been put into serious jeopardy when Rollins almost passed out during his entrance. Rollins said this about that ring walk: "I was so amped up, so fired up for that match for Brock Lesnar that I legitimately almost passed out on my entrance. No joke, I don't know if you can ever catch it, but there's a moment where I'm drifting kind of back to the center of the ramp and I'm glossed over, because when you get so fired up, and it's that feeling when you've been lying down or sitting down for too long and you stand up and you get lightheaded, and you know what? You go back and watch the entrance back and you can definitely see the moment it happens." Well, it's not funny, is it? WrestleMania 36, Becky Lynch pitched to lose her Raw Women's title. Shayna Baszler was on a tear upon being promoted to the main roster from NXT on the February the 10th episode of Monday Night Raw. She was biting folk in the neck like a vampire. She was beating everyone to win the Elimination Chamber match. All signs pointed to Shayna Baszler winning at WrestleMania 36 in her match against Becky Lynch. However, after a match that lasted 8 minutes and 30 seconds, Lynch was the one who came out on top as she reversed a Karafuda clutch into a pinfall for the win. Politics at play, you might be thinking? Not even close, as Becky herself explained to the Bella Twins podcast back in the summer of 2020 how her and Seth Rollins trying for a baby meant that she actually pitched to lose her Raw Women's title to Shayna Baszler at WrestleMania 36. Here's what she said: "I just thought it would take a long time to get pregnant, and it didn't. We were super lucky, and it happened before I would have expected, and I was still the champ at the time, which I actually thought I was going to lose the title at WrestleMania, which I also pitched, but that's neither here nor there. You know, plans change." WrestleMania 37, Andrade claims the company pulled Charlotte Flair from the show due to a mistaken pregnancy. Charlotte Flair had been removed from the advertising for WrestleMania 37 around the same time that her fiancé, at the time and now husband, Andrade, had been released from the company. Obviously, people wondered if the two happenings were connected and Charlotte could be jetting off to wherever her husband was going. But then she confirmed that she had COVID. Andrade then told Lucha Libre Online that he got COVID, then Charlotte got COVID, and then roughly a week after he got that initial positive test, WWE granted him his release from the company, which is what he wanted all along. But then, and I quote, this is Andrade speaking, by the way, about 3 weeks later, they called her, and it was the same doctor from the drug test. She was a little scared, asking what's happening, what's going on. They told her that she was pregnant. She was confused because we went to a pharmacy, we bought pregnancy tests, and everything was negative. How does a doctor, supposedly one of the best, go and tell her that? It was the same doctor who said I tested positive. Was that a lie too? WWE didn't do anything about, no blood testing to make sure. Charlotte and Andrade then went to get tests to see if she was actually pregnant, but Charlotte wasn't. Only then did WWE offer to help, according to the current AEW man. Charlotte then had to issue a statement saying that what Andrade said was actually true, but WWE Medical only thought she was pregnant because her HCG levels had come back high and she was medically suspended for pregnancy. Charlotte had done a series of tests that confirmed there was no pregnancy and clarified this was before any issues with COVID arose. Goodness me. WrestleMania 38, The Undertaker shares his feelings on Vince McMahon's stunner. We all saw it. It was terrible. Vince McMahon consistently couldn't take the Stone Cold Stunner, and no finer example of this has been seen than what went down on WrestleMania 38 Sunday. During the WWE 24 documentary about the event, we see The Undertaker sharing his thoughts on Vince's stunner sell to a very embarrassed Vince in the corner of gorilla position. "You could have just quit when you took your shirt off," said Undertaker. "It was effing right off the cliff after that." Vince then replies, "I lost my shows." To which the dead man then replied, "Hot damn." I don't know if he actually said hot damn. It sounds like Undertaker says hot damn, but he goes on to say, "Maybe hot damn, I wish you lost your way to the ring," before grabbing the old fella by the shoulders and having a good old laugh like he was the son Vince never ever had. Happy birthday, Shane McMahon. WrestleMania 39, this is a quote some stooge reported to a Wrestling Insider newsletter. It's a bit hard to do one for WrestleMania 39 considering the event hasn't even happened yet, but I guess the biggest slice of news coming into the build has been The Rock turning down the company's approaches for a match with Roman Reigns because he didn't have enough time to get himself ready, to get himself into shape. Now, Brian Gewirtz, who works for Rocky 7 Bucks Productions and is a former head writer for WWE, has claimed this is a load of Brahma bollocks. I know that it is not the case, Gewirtz told the Bill Simmons podcast. I know it's a line, then it just took a life of its own where all of a sudden everyone reading it on the internet and Twitter takes it as fact, to the point where Roman goes on the Tonight Show and tells Jimmy Fallon, I understand The Rock made a statement and doesn't have time to get into the ring shape. I'm watching this like, what? What statement? Show me the statement. There is no statement. This is a quote that some stooge reported to a Wrestling Insider newsletter and now it's written in granite and stone. That's the stuff that drives me nuts. And I wonder, this is me talking now, if we'll ever find out why The Rock actually wouldn't wrestle the Tribal Chief at WrestleMania 39.